I sought the Lord, and He answered me and delivered me
Welcome, everybody. This is Gary DeClute again, and
from
this is a
every
special version of People You Should Know
those who love
Timeless. And I say timeless because these people that you're going to hear about have lives that are timeless. They're going to go on for eternity. And so you're going to hear some eternity stories today. And we have a very special guest, and I say really, really special because as I started out to research who this guy is and what he's done and all his things in life, I found out that not only when I hear him talk about himself a little bit, it was only the tip of the iceberg. What's behind all that has just been very cool. And I want you to meet him right now. And his name is Brent Berdick. Brent is right now the CFO for Wheaton Montessori School. And he also does a lot of other jobs around there that he'll probably tell you about in just a minute. But welcome to Timeless, People You Should Know, Brent.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
Fine. How are you doing today?
I guess I had a frog in my throat, but other than that, I'm doing great.
The frog is good. Were you out directing traffic again this morning?
I almost had to a couple of times. We had a few backups on New Gary Avenue. Whenever that happens, we gotta keep that to a minimum. Otherwise, the city doesn't like that too much.
Yeah, I bet the crowd of people around Montessori School in the morning, just for safety reasons, must be major a major emphasis for you, right?
Well, yeah, and then just being gracious, saying you got to pull in, right? You got to pull up. Right?
That's
So yeah,
true.
it's an interest.
But
Yeah, from a
but
customer satisfaction standpoint, how can you be firm with your customers, but also make sure that they feel valued?
but you have a good system. I've watched some of it, and from a little distance from across the street. I just stopped not long ago and watched how you were out there doing the stuff. And it was one day where you were really doing your thing. But Brent, besides knowing you're going to have to maybe um, make sure everything goes smoothly in the morning while people are pulling into Wheaton Montessori, what gets you up in the morning?
You've asked me this question before, and literally my wife gets me up
Oh, okay.
because she gets up first and does her stuff, and when she's done, then she comes and gets me up, and I follow, and she goes to school, and then I go to school. But I think what really motivates me during the day, that gets me excited or wakes me up at like 3 o'clock in the morning saying, hey, what do I need to do, is at this point in my life making an environment where my staff feels loved, our staff feels loved and encouraged, and prayed for, and then just a wonderful place for our students to come, so that they know that they're loved, and that they know that they're valued, and when they leave, that they have that basis. I mean, there's the whole Montessori side, but that's really for our certified staff. But for me, just as the support person, just to make sure that everyone is feeling loved, and that they see that modeled in me as best as I can. And sometimes that can be a challenge, but that's really my goal, and what gets me excited and makes me want to move forward.
Yeah, the Montessori model is really a unique one in that, and not that there aren't other models somewhat similar, but I mean the idea of making independent learners, I mean lifelong learners out of all of us. That's the ultimate goal I know of that whole schooling. And as a teacher myself, I look at that and kind of always admired that idea. Other than that, just a little bit about your background. Bring us up to date a little bit on growing up. Glenbrook South, was that your high school?
Yeah, up in Glenview, Illinois. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
really interesting. My parents' family grew up on our parents' families grew up in two different parts of the country, if you will. My dad grew up in Buffalo, New York,
Wow.
and my mom grew up here in Evanston, but she was born in Salt Lake City, and has a very deep Mormon heritage, 100%. My great grandfather was actually born in a covered wagon when the Mormons were crossing from Nauvoo, Illinois, to Salt Lake City,
Wow.
um, which is pretty cool. And that side of my Americana history is pretty cool. My dad's family is from Central Europe, really Prussia and Poland, and came over. I would say I think they came over in the very early 1900s, late 1800s, where my mom's family has been here for generations. One of the um, first what do you call it? Immigration of the Mormons coming from England. So that's some deep background in me. My parents met. My dad. They're both the same age. They're going to be 90 in 2022 here, which is pretty cool. And my dad graduated from college a year early, and he was going to be drafted during the Korean War. The postman came and told his family, "Hey, your draft notice is at the post office. I'm delivering it on Monday."
Oh,
And so my dad got up Monday morning. This is after he graduated from college, and went and enlisted in the Naval ROTC, or the Naval Officer Candidate Program, and became a naval officer, and was stationed at the Glenview Naval Air Station. And my mom was finished in 4 years, and she was at Northwestern, and was a sorority person, and they were doing an event out at the Navy base back then in the 50s to help the troops, and they met there at the Glenview Naval Air Station.
wow.
So yeah, and then my mom ended up going to grad school. She was going to go on the West Coast. She went to the East Coast, and actually got her master's from Columbia. I thought everybody's mother who went to college in the 50s had their undergraduate from Northwestern and their graduate from Columbia. I thought that was just what everybody did. They're not realizing how trailblazing my mom was back in the 50s. But they dated when my mom was in New York and my dad was stationed on his ship in Boston, and kind of that whirlwind.
Romance?
Whirlwind romance. Then my dad got out of the Navy, went to graduate school at Michigan, got an MBA, started working for Procter and Gamble, and me and my siblings were all born in Cincinnati. And about a year after I was born, they moved back to Chicago, and we've lived here in the suburbs ever since.
Yeah. So you went to Brook High School, right?
I did Columbus South and Glenview. Yep.
You played
My mom
sports?
taught. I played football, but I was really involved I played football my freshman year, and then kind of stepped out because it was too much. I really was involved in marching band. I was drum major, and did theater. Was in jazz choir. I can tap dance. I can sing harmony on a good day, but I really have to study to know how to do that. But and then my family's done a lot of community theater, so I'm definitely a big ham and love community theaters. Well, my dad is a accomplished musician and singer, and was very active in that as well.
Okay, so bring us up to date. I know a little bit of the story about you and your wife and family right now.
So my wife and I met at Willow Creek Church in South Barrington. I was leading the Single Adult Ministries New Year's Eve party in 1995 to 96, that transition. Just a huge party, ton of fun, great time. And Liz was one of the volunteers, and I met her there. And we were friends for like 3.5 years. And I was involved in the Single Adult Ministries there. And whenever I would meet new people when we were doing worship night at our new community services, sometimes I would look around and see the different people in our ministries, and I would pray for them as we were doing stuff, just because it was fun to look around and see them. And after I met Liz, about a month later, I looked over and she was worshiping. And they said, "Oh, that's Liz. I met her at the New Year's Eve party." And it's a singles ministry, so I'm like, "Oh, someday I hope she finds somebody and settles down." And I pray for that, and I got a pretty strong prompting and said, "Oh, she will, and it's you." And I'm like, "What?" That's not what I expected. And I kind of dismissed it and forgot about it. And Liz and I ended up forming a really great friendship over about 3 years where we served together. And I was talking to some of my mentors about, "Hey, how do you do the marriage thing? How do you find the right thing?" And they just said, "You have so many friends that are girls. Well, I don't know what your problem is." I'm like, "Oh, I never really thought of that before." And then we were at a Willow leadership meeting, and we were in a hotel room with a ton of probably 30 people. We had way too many people in there from Single Adult Ministries. And I was talking to Liz, and I felt like I got hit on the side of the head with a 2x4. And I got a prompting that that reminded me of what I had heard earlier. And I looked at her and I realized that, oh my God, this is the person. This is who I'm supposed to marry. and it all made sense. And then it took me a while to ask her out, but I did. And I guess the rest is history. So we're married. We've been married since '99. I have 4 kids. Right now, today, ranging in age from I have a 21-year-old, 19-year-old twins, and a 14-year-old daughter. 14-year-old twin, or 19-year-old twin daughters, and a 14-year-old daughter, a 13-year-old daughter.
Wow, wow. Now, what is your daughter in Montessori school too, or is she going to middle school someplace or high school? She's in high school?
No, my youngest is 13, and she is in our adolescent program at
Okay.
Montessori school. She is a 7th grader, and that program goes through 7th, 8th, and 9th. So we have 2.5 more years with her, and then I'll have all my kids out of Montessori, and it will be really sad. I'm not looking forward to that.
Well, we're giving people a little more information too about you, about Montessori school and career. But what about career? I mean, what career path have you followed to present?
So it's interesting. I got into, when I was in high school, I was very into music, and I was really into sound and sound recording. And I loved the way like amplifiers worked and all that stuff. So I took electronics in high school as my elective, and I learned how amplifiers worked and all that stuff. Like, this is really cool stuff. I'd like to be a recording engineer. But you only need a degree for that. And my parents, obviously, both master's degrees, both beyond high achieving students. My older sisters, I have 2 older sisters. One graduated second in her class from Glenbrook South, and the other one in the top 10. And didn't, academically, they never really struggled. And then I'm dyslexic, and it runs in my family. My grandfather on my mom's side was dyslexic as well. And my grandmother, story goes, she helped teach my grandfather how to read, and he became an attorney. So that was interesting. But anyway, I was apprehensive about going to college because academically I don't do well. I learn really well and I can pick things up very quickly, but in a pure academic setting in that traditional school environment, I don't learn that way. Like Montessori would have been a way better way for me to learn versus that traditional thing. So I ended up going to Southern Illinois University because I was able to do a 2-year program there that could lead into a bachelor's. And so I got my associate's degree in electronic technology and stayed on. I got my bachelor's and actually ended up thriving in college. Academically, I did okay, but the whole concept of higher education, I just thrived in. I loved the university. I loved all of the aspects of volunteering. I produced a variety show there. I was in a fraternity. I was in student government. My senior year, I got paid to go to college because I ran the new student orientation program. And at the end of college, a lot of my mentors said, you should go on and get your master's in higher education and do this new student orientation, be in that part of higher education. And I just said, no, I'm not going to do that because that's not what my degree is in. I have this electronics degree. My bachelor's is in advanced technical studies with microcomputers and some marketing. And like, I'm gonna go do that. So I made a decision to say, yeah, I'm gonna go that route. And for 30 years, I worked in the IT industry, all in sales, because I have the ability. I love people. I love reaching out to people. I'm happiest when I'm meeting new people and talking to people. And my technical background was I have the ability to pick up technology very quickly. And the technology changes so fast that you can't learn it in a classroom. I worked for some leading edge technology companies where by the time it was coming out, there was no way to teach it. The guys that were making the technology would do presentations and say, here it is, or this is where we're headed, and you just had to pick it up. There was no training like in a classroom. So I just stayed with that and I loved it. Did that up until about 2.5 years ago. We started Wheaton Montessori in 2000 when Liz and I got married. And I have a strong small business background. Some of the things that I did in IT was to mentor and manage small IT companies. So I really have a strong small business background as well, and helped start that. And it was really Liz's thing. And I would come in and I served on the board because the school is a non-for-profit, and I would help and be involved, but it really was a volunteer thing. And my father-in-law was very involved in the business. And he came to me about 2.5 years ago in 2019, and he had been suffering from cancer, prostate cancer for years. And he just said, I need you to come and do this if you'd like to. And And at the time, I was working for a startup that was kind of faltering a little bit. And I just saw the writing on the wall that now this was the time. And I always thought I would retire and take his place, if you will. I never realized that that would be sooner than later. So in June of 2019, I started full time, thinking I was going to do that and some IT consulting. But it turns out that um, the school has grown to the point where I have to do it full time. So I technically work for the entity that owns all the physical infrastructure. That's a company that my wife and sister-in-law own. And we lease that infrastructure back to the Montessori school. So I have two roles: my official role in that company, and then I actually serve on the board of directors for Wheaton Montessori School, where I am the treasurer, or CFO, as you said. So kind of CFO of both organizations, and it makes for, I work way more than I thought I would be working.
And you wear many hats. I've seen
Yeah, I
you in
do.
front, I've seen you inside, I've seen you all around. So you do, and to make sure it all comes off. I mean, some of the stories I know you've told me are just brilliant. But I want to get into this thing of coming to know Jesus. When did that happen, and how did that happen? And tell us a little bit about your personal faith story.
So it's interesting when you ask that, because I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't feel God's presence, which I guess is unique, if you will. I have lived an incredibly blessed life. And I think some of that is just a faith legacy. Obviously the faith on the Mormon side, say what you will about the Mormon church or whatever, but obviously long legacy of faith there. And then on my dad's side, he was an Episcopalian, but strong faith on that side as well, in that my dad's parents moved to be with us once they got married, and my mom's parents were here. So I grew up with my grandparents here locally in the suburbs, and very active in my life. So I saw that, my grandmother went to the Mormon church. That's fine. We weren't Mormon. My mom left the Mormon faith when she was younger, because actually her brother died in World War II, and she had to do a faith analysis and realized that she needed something else, and she ended up becoming Episcopalian like my father. And so we were real involved in the church, because all of us, my dad sang in the choir, my grandfather sang, his dad, and my sisters did. I sang in the traditional boys choir at an Episcopal church, singing soprano. And just, I always, in church, I always felt, and in that church community, I always felt God's presence. I always felt safe. And there was never a question in my mind that God wasn't there. And my grandparents would say, especially my mom's mom, you just have to trust God has a plan for you. And I think when I was like 8, there was a vacation Bible school that they sponsored, and evangelicals came and ran it. It was kind of outsourced. And I kind of knew the story, but I really didn't. But they laid it out really straightforward and said, hey, this is the gospel story. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got that. I'm on. And I felt that it changed that, if you will, or an acceleration of my faith. And I definitely was saved officially from that point forward. I didn't grow as much as I thought, but because for me, my Episcopal Church of origin had some issues. Nothing against the Episcopal Church. I think it's more the church of my origin that just, I was really great, but it wasn't to the point where I really wanted to engage at the level that I engage now, if you will, but always was there. And then when I got out of college, that church really had no single adult or young adult program. So I didn't feel comfortable going there, but I also didn't feel comfortable leaving, like I was going to betray them if I did. And it took a seminary student from Trinity College when I was about 26 years old, who really, he was washing our windows at a small business that I had started. And he just kind of challenged me. He said, why don't you do this? You're an adult now. Come to Willow, where he was doing some internship stuff. So I came, and just like college, it was like fish to water. It's like, wow, this is great. And I got very involved and did a lot of things that Willow and haven't really looked back.
Wow. That's quite a journey. Brent, you and I have talked about this before, the idea of calling, you know, um, everyone, maybe whether they know it or not, can experience a calling if they're open to it. And a calling can be eternal. Sometimes it might change even for some people. Obviously, some exciting moments in your life you felt called to do to move ahead with, and then you switched, and now you've switched again. So what would you can you put your finger on a couple things there that could identify this in your life and have identified that to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I really never thought of a calling until I was probably in my late 20s or early 30s. The way that I felt it before that, when I was a younger person in high school or in college, is really I always knew that God had a plan for me. And my prayer life when I was younger, it's so funny, was so much more intense than it is now, just like straight prayer. I have a strong prayer life now, but it was different when I was younger, where I just would say, God, I know you have the next thing, and I would be waiting for it. Like, and the windows would just open. Like, again, I said, I live a very blessed life. Like, oh, then this, and some of those things were pretty obvious.
Mm,
And I was told by my fifth grade teacher that college might not be an option for me because of my dyslexia.
mm,
So the biggest challenge really I had in my life was saying, well, it's really tough when all of your parents are, graduate degree people, and your sisters are just, it's like nothing for them to achieve academically. I said, well, I got to do that. So that was kind of my goal, that
mm,
I was going to prove all of them wrong and go to college and get my degree. So I did that. And then I felt like I needed to take the next step and be successful professionally. So there was a season of life where in my 20s where I really tried to excel professionally and achieved a bunch of success. And I achieved success up until I got married. And the 3 years before I got married, I was really kind of going through, well, wait a minute. I looked at some pretty high powered executive type, not executive, or just business type people. And I had some really good examples. And I saw the trajectory of their lives. And I'm like, wow, I could get on that bandwagon. And to be honest, it didn't look very good. It looked really stressful. It looked a lot of divorce, a lot of broken families,
mm,
high powered, competitive, Fortune 50. And I realized that when I was like 27, 28 years old, that that's not what I am. And then I realized I need to be in that world as a believer and just be an example and do the best work and not get on that treadmill of the climbing the corporate ladder, if you will.
mm,
Say, I'm going to be a sales guy. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it the best way I can and be an example. And it simplified my life, right? To say that's what that is. And pretty much stayed in that role until in that mode, and did really well and did different things um, until 2019, when I said, okay, I'm going to move on to the next season, if you will. And I'm just turned 56 on Friday, and it's the next 20 or 30 years. Liz and I have discussed at great length how we aren't going to retire. We're doing what we want to do. So I mean, I'm kind of already retired, if you will, but we don't want to stop. And so it's okay. What does the next 30 years look like? So now I'm in the role of how can I help my staff, the staff, our employees, our relationships, the families in our school, those children, and hopefully 30 plus years from now, when I'm no longer physically able to do that or whatever, the legacy is more people remember that they were loved and
mm.
that there was an example. So it's really where I am now in my mission now. So I guess I really didn't feel mission until in my late 20s, when I realized that, okay, you've established yourself professionally, you can do this. Now it's time to really do this as a calling and love people and love customers. And I'll tell you, that was a real challenge, because the majority of what I did was either working with customers or working with business partners and building those relationships. And so I could really be a witness and be different. There's something different about the way this guy manages our business. There's something different about how the salesperson works. And sometimes that would be at odds with what management of those larger corporations and then later IT consulting firms would be. And sometimes I would bump heads with management on that stuff. And then how do you bump heads and still be an example for Christ, right? To say, no, I know that we need to make a quota, but that practice really, if we're going to have a relationship with this customer, a relation with this business customer, a relation with this business customer after this, we can't do that. I'm not going to do that. And how do you do that? Remain integrity, and then still. And it was tough. There were some times when certain managers would just be frustrated, and I would just have to say, no, I'm not comfortable. I'm just hoping that those are examples of that hopefully was an impact on them. Actually, I hope, because at the end of the day, I was going to be okay. I just wanted to make sure that they were seeing it.
Yeah, we never know. Well, it sounds to me from hearing this whole story from childhood all the way through that you've done what Jesus asked us to do in that upper room that night where he took a basin and towel and went over and washed the feet of the disciples. He was really all about servant, and that's what he was saying, serve, 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 serve. And that's what it sounds like to me. And bless you, man. I'm so glad to know you. I've only known you really for about 8 or 9 months personally, because we've been in a small group together.
It's about a year now, actually, Gary.
It's almost, wow, this is crazy. So,
Yeah.
but where I used to see you though was welcoming everyone to Promised Land. And you even welcomed me a few times when I served at Promised Land and welcomed people at the other end. So you'd welcome at one end and I would be at the other end checking people in. So I'm so grateful to know you, Brent. God bless you, and you and Liz. And may he truly shine his face on you. And I know you're really grateful for everything God is doing in your life right now. And we're grateful for you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Gary.
And he answered me and delivered me from every fear. And those who look on